Hey, what's up you guys? You're watching Team APS, Paul here, and today I want to talk about 5 Yu-Gi-Oh cards that got power crept in 2018. So first of all, power creep means that a card basically lost popularity, lost favor because better cards were released or because the game's meta just sort of moved to a point where they're no longer useful for some reason or another. And this always happens in Yu-Gi-Oh, so I'm just wrapping up the stuff that I noticed at the start of 2018 was pretty popular, then in 2018, not so good. And why? Let's hop in. Card 1, Dimensional Barrier. So this card actually was a very oppressive card in 2017, and it just for good reason. I mean, it literally says your opponent cannot do a certain extra deck summoning mechanic. It was very good against Burning Abyss because they made Xyz monsters. If you called this, they couldn't make Dante, therefore they couldn't play. If you use this against Pendulums, it's like, no Pendulum summoning this turn, you literally can't do anything. In addition to that, this card had no real activation, minimum. You didn't have to there didn't have to be a monster of that type on the field to activate it. There's no life point cost or discard or anything. It's just a trap that you can kind of activate instantly. That's huge. But not only that, this card, people wanted this card banned. It even negates the monster's effects on the field. So like if say your opponent's normal summon Skull Crobat Joker and they're going to search, you flip D-Barrier, and now they can't use the monster's effect, and they still can't Pendulum summon that turn. Same with invoked decks. If they want to summon Mechaba, for example, you can literally just stop their fusion spell, and also if a Mechaba's on the field, you can just negate its effect with D-Barrier. It's a huge card. But then Master Rule 4 came along, and the card still saw some use because the Pendulum Magician strategy was always really good, so you could still use D-Barrier against it. But by and large, this card just sort of fell out of favor. Link monsters aren't affected by it, and most decks have to make Link monsters to get to their other strategies, and now we've got this surge of decks that just use Link summons, and D-Barrier doesn't help against Link summons. So it really loses that important spot that it had in most side decks because, well, it's just not really quite worth it anymore, and that's a shame. I actually always thought that D-Barrier was a really fun card to use. I think it's a great cover-all basis type of card, and I think those are good. But also it was a powerful one. Like I said, people wanted this thing banned, limited, and it never happened. And as we can see now, the card's just kind of been shifted away. Will it ever become relevant again? I don't think so. Unless Konami randomly decides to errata this card and include links in its card text as something you can call, I just don't see it being good. I think we're getting a new trap soon that does something sort of similar, but not really. And yeah, I don't know. I don't think this card will ever really become great again as long as Link monsters exist. So unfortunately, Dimensional Barrier just hasn't made the cut anymore. The next card is Cosmic Cyclone. So this was a card that, again, last year got loads of play. Cosmic Cyclone banishes a spell or trap on the field at the cost of 1,000 life points. It's a quick play spell, so it's just like Twin Twisters or MST. Twin Twisters, a card that's already kind of seen its own fair share of power creep, it just destroyed the cards. But Cosmic Cyclone offered something a lot better. By banishing the cards, you were able to circumvent a lot of really annoying effects. There are many cards, spell or trap cards that have graveyard effects. So when you're banish this from your grave and do something else, or banish something else from your grave and add it back to your hand, say a Necroz Mirror, for example, if it's in the grave, it can banish itself, or Gymnite Fusion can do things like that. But the problem with Cosmic Cyclone is the life point costs. And I think that it wasn't really a big deal until Konami made the new end of match procedures that, just sort of mean you can't waste life points anymore. You can't play cards that involve really any life point loss because it's dangerous. It might put you below your opponent in life, and once you do that, you can lose the game just because you were trying to play normal cards like Cosmic Cyclone. So even though Cosmic Cyclone is really useful, even though it was a great way to stop all kinds of things, the fact of the matter is, the life point cost is too much. And part of it also probably has a lot to do with the fact that Yu-Gi-Oh! In many ways has shifted away from spell and trap cards. You don't really see people setting lots of traps, and continuous spells are kind of hit or miss. So, but I really do feel like this card could come back. I think if the end of match procedures were to ever change, though it doesn't look like they will be too soon, then maybe this card could see some relevance. If we see another surge of decks that use lots of continuous spells, or spells that activate in the grave, or just floating type spells that maybe can't be destroyed but can be banished, then this card could be really helpful. It could really see play again, but for now, unfortunately, it just hasn't made the cut. Third card, Sanctum Strike. So we just talked about with Cosmic Cyclone how cards that require life point payments are not really seeing play. This is another one of those. Sanctum Strike is a card that, honestly, it's the best Solemn card in the game, in my opinion. I think a lot of people would agree. It can stop special summons, which is huge. It means you get to stop any extra deck summon, any summon that doesn't start a chain. That could be a Cyber Dragon or a Dark Arm Dragon or a BLS or a Ultimate Conductor Tyranno. It can stop all of those. And then it can also negate any monster effect. Like, spell speed 3 like Solemn cards are. So, you know, it doesn't, like, your opponent's not gonna get to like chain their Mechaba or chain their Vortex Dragon or, you know, anything like that. Once you Sanctum Strike, it's pretty much over if your opponent doesn't have like Red Reboot or something like that. So, yeah, powerful card. And, you know, a card that was a staple at 3 since its release for like the last, you know, 2 years or so. But that just kind of all changed. I mean, obviously there's been a shift in Yu-Gi-Oh! Like we've said, where people just don't set traps anymore. They're seen as dead. If you go first and you have traps, then, you know, like, you don't get to do your strategy, you have to set them. And if you go second and you have traps, then you're definitely out of luck, because now you've got like these trap cards in your hand, your opponent's already set their board up and you can't do anything with your Solemn or your Mirror Force or whatever anymore. And that really blows. But I think it's a combination of that, and then of course the life point thing, where you just can't afford to pay life points. And if you're facing Trick Stars and you use this against them, like, they're gonna love it because they can deal so much burn damage that the 1500 that you paid to negate something literally just ends up being your demise. And just like with Cosmic Cyclone, the card might fill the role perfectly fine, but if time gets called and you have less life points and you can't maybe get to your battle phase or whatever, then that's kind of it. And it's a shame. I mean, I would almost say that this is kind of like the Solemn Judgement too, where like it's power crept, but this is Sanctum Strike of all things, and no one's using it anymore. It really sucks. All right, so number 4 is an interesting one. It's the Elemental Link monsters. So I'm talking Mrs. Radiant, Miss Starboy, Doolittle Chimera, Hyperstar, all of those. The just Link 2 monsters that just took 2 monsters with the same attribute and they had the good arrows. I don't think that they're good anymore, mostly because of Nightmares. Nightmares released and they're even more generic and they all have better utility effects, but also because we're getting so many more unique, like archetype specific Link monsters that kind of just do better things for a given deck. And so, yeah, these cards have kind of been crept out. It isn't to say that they aren't used. There are still plenty of decks that do. You know, Paleozoics make great use of Miss Starboy and, you know, that kind of thing. A lot of newer decks are using Hyperstar and Wee Witch. But the big problem with them, I think, is that they just weren't released at the same time. I remember like Simo made a video recently or not recently, but when these cards had been recently released, and he was like, yeah, they should have released them all in the same set. And I totally agree. I think that if these cards all released in Code of the Duelist, they would have had a lot more time being relevant. I think Link monsters would have been a lot better received. But because of the slow trickle that Konami used when releasing them, I think they've just been crept out. They're just better cards. If you're playing a Pendulum deck, you're gonna use Electromite. Or, you know, if you're playing like this deck, you'll use that thing, or like, you know, Nightmares. So unfortunately, I don't think these cards are really all that useful anymore. They don't see very much play. Now we've got like Lenflinkus, which is like perfectly just the definition of a generic like Link monster to give you the arrows you want. So it's not to say they aren't used. Like I said, there are plenty of decks that use them, but as it is now, they're generally better options. And the last cards I want to talk about kind of as a group, and that's just the old super powerful staples that are legal and just not played. That's Monster Reborn, Raigeki, and Solemn Judgement. It's kind of what comes to mind for me. So you'll see Monster Reborn used in combo decks still, a little bit, you know, it's useful, but it just doesn't seem like it's the type of card that is a gimme in decks anymore. Like, you know, there was a time when like you're deck building, right? And, you know, Monster Reborn is just a given, you gotta put it in. But nowadays, a lot of decks just don't need it. Obviously, Pendulum decks don't need it. Most decks have some form of like built-in monster revival that's just kind of better. It doesn't seem like it has as much impact even as a top deck, because we're in a game where individual monsters aren't really all that great, but the ability to summon many is good. So you still see stuff like Soul Charge being used, but not so much Monster Reborn. And then also there's Solemn Judgement. I remember when it came off the ban list earlier, it was like, whoa, this card's off the ban list, what does this mean? You know, Solemn Judgement was a powerhouse. It's at 1 and no one's really playing it. I mean, for a while people side decked it, no one's even really side decking it anymore. I wouldn't be surprised if it came to 2 or 3 and none of that even changed. And then the last one is by Geeky, which it's mass removal, but evenly matched kind of does it better. Like, it banishes cards, it doesn't like, you know, destroy or anything like that, and it can even banish face down, and that's obviously really strong. Yeah, these cards in one point in Yu-Gi-Oh's history were literally like powerhouse, like staple cards, you know, very high demand, seen as broken, they've all been on the ban list, and they're all back, and they're not doing anything. And that's just a real testament to how power creep has affected our game. But anywho, that concludes my list of the 5 power crept Yu-Gi-Oh cards in 2018. There's plenty of others that have just sort of fallen off the radar I probably missed, so let me know down in the comments what they are, and I'd love to hear it. Anyway, it's gonna be it. I will see you guys in the next one.